You can't just throw up a wall made out of cheap East German concrete and say, we'll be on this side and you'll be on that side, and you'll live your life and we'll live ours. That's not the world we live in. It's not the world that we're going to live in. We live in a globalized world. Globalization is going strong. It's not as global as it used to be. Yep. It's regional more than global in a lot of cases, but the global economy continues to be a global economy.
Welcome to our Industrial Advisors podcast. You have Bill Condon and Matt McGregor. We are live at IAMC in Quebec City, and we have an excellent guest with us today. We have Willis Sparks, who just gave a fantastic presentation at the IAMC conference with everybody. You can always tell when the presentation is good because nobody leaves. Nobody left. Nobody walked out.
I didn't see anybody walking out.
So it was really insightful. Willis is an expert in the geopolitical space. And I guess let's start with that. How did you get into that space? And tell us a little bit about what you're doing today and your expertise.
When I graduated from college, I wanted to be an actor. And I went to the Juilliard School. I got accepted to Juilliard, and I went. And that's another story. But when we were in our third year at Juilliard, we got invited to do an exchange with the students at the Moscow Art Theater School. Now, this is Soviet Moscow. This was 1989.
Yeah.
So, as I used to say, this was a time when cab drivers in Moscow thought perestroika was their idea. So it was just a different era, obviously.
Yeah.
And it blew my mind. And I never quite got over it. I learned so much about America seeing the Soviet Union, you know? And I obviously learned a lot about Russia and the relationship with the other republics that made up the Soviet Union. So I did become an actor. I worked as an actor. I worked on stage. I did some very bad television and a couple of loud movies, but mainly theater.
Yeah.
But I never got over this feeling that, again, it was 1989 when I first went to Moscow. And through the 90s, the world is changing and I'm missing it.
Yeah.
And so I reached an age where I thought, if I'm ever going to go back to school and study international politics, so I got to do it now. I was in my mid-30s by that point. So I did. I got accepted to the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia. And I went there. I was at a school in Paris called Sciences Po for 1 year. And I just actually, through connections, ended up with my current job at Eurasia Group, which I couldn't have imagined when I was finishing grad school. If I'd imagined a job, I would not have imagined that I was really going to get something as interesting as what I got.
Right. Yeah.
I basically sit on top of the world's largest political risk consulting firm, on top of, in the sense that everything they write about every country, every economic sector, every issue goes through my inbox. And I've been there 20 years. And so at a certain point, your knowledge level builds up and builds up and builds up. And as I said during the speech, I'm lucky that I don't have to concentrate on Russia or any other one country.
Yeah.
I get to be the guy that talks about the larger international trends, like the world from 35,000 feet. And it's every bit as interesting now, that subject, as it was when I got my first glimpse.
That's really cool. Yeah. That is really cool. You talked about this a little bit in the presentation. You know, we have a big election coming up, and you guys are as knowledgeable as anyone on that subject with analytics and the data that you guys are seeing. What's the data tell you right now on who the next president's going to be?
The data is really inconclusive at this moment because although we are seeing a bump nationally for Kamala Harris, as we know, it's not about the national vote. The national vote can tell you a lot about the swing state vote because you can compare past elections. What is the relationship between how Pennsylvania votes versus the U.S. as a whole? So it's not that national polls are useless. They're not. They do show trends. But right now, at this stage, what is today, September 18th, we haven't had enough really high-quality polling from Georgia and North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, and of course, Pennsylvania, to give us a sense of where this race is really going. It's not an exaggeration to say that I think it's in 5 of the 7 states. Whoever leads by less than 1 percentage point.
Wow.
And if you compare where polls are at this stage in election to actual outcomes of elections, we're not only within the margin of error in these states, we're within the inner margin of error. I mean, we're really on a knife's edge at this point. Now, we have thought from the beginning that Donald Trump was a slight favorite. Nobody had a lot of conviction in that call. But back at the very beginning of the year when we thought it was Biden and Trump, we thought it's an anti-incumbent year. And it's only become more anti-incumbent in other countries, as I was talking about at the beginning of my speech. In all these countries, there's this intense anti-incumbency. But what has changed is, and this is to me the most fascinating thing about our election right now, we know that around the world, in country after country, incumbents are getting tossed out and their parties are getting beat. So who's the incumbent in our election? Now, the quick, easy answer is, well, Kamala Harris is the vice president. She's a representative of the Biden administration. She's the incumbent. But wait a minute. In any election, the incumbent is the guy you know. And the challenger is the one that you don't know much about, that you're trying to figure out. So in our crazy election, the roles are reversed. Everyone on our planet, and probably on other planets too, have opinions about Donald Trump. They have feelings about Donald Trump, whether they're very positive or very negative. Kamala Harris is still introducing herself, and Donald Trump is also trying to introduce Kamala Harris. And there's this race to define who she is. And in that sense, the dynamic is she's not the incumbent.
Right.
She's the challenger. Donald Trump has been president. He's a known quantity. You know his strengths and his weaknesses. And Kamala Harris is still kind of a blank slate. So that kind of turns the whole anti-incumbency question on its head. If I had a gun to my head and I knew there were bullets in it and I knew the person pointing it would really shoot me if I didn't make a prediction, I think Kamala Harris is going to win a close election. But that's not the view of the company that I work for, which is still 55-45 Trump. We're debating this in real time. We're watching every bit of data that we can get our hands on. But my personal bet would be, at the end of the day, I think that Kamala Harris is more likely to win. One last point, though, before we move on. On Election Day 2016, I was on stage in a ballroom in Dublin, Ireland, telling 700 people that Hillary Clinton was about to beat Donald Trump. So, you know what I'm saying? That doesn't mean that I'm going to just give the benefit of the doubt to Donald Trump. I'm still going to try and get it right. But Donald Trump is such a wild card figure in American politics that it's an element of uncertainty that we have to take into account in every piece of data that we look at.
Okay, so if it's right there on the razor's edge, 50-50, geopolitically speaking, what would you say is the most powerful thing one or the other candidate could do in this next 2 months to sway these votes?
That is a great question. I think the honest answer to that question is make sure that your turnout operation is state of the art. Make sure that you can get every single vote you can pull to the polls on Election Day, or getting people to vote early, however they vote. It really is about that. And I would remind people, too, that when we talk about undecided voters, we are not just talking about people who are looking at the two candidates and not sure which one they like better. Undecided also means undecided on whether they're actually going to vote. Whatever they say to pollsters, are they really going to go stand in line? And a lot of that has to do with the expectations they have about whether their side might win. But it also has to do with whether there is a get out the vote operation that is getting people to the polls who might not ordinarily vote.
That's right.
Young people, older people, there are literally millions of people in this category. By the way, this is another reason why I personally think Kamala Harris is a slight favorite, because Donald Trump seems to be outsourcing a lot of his get out the vote stuff. And I don't know what the thinking is there, but Kamala Harris has the entire apparatus of the Democratic Party on this. And in popular votes, when we have a national election, Democrats win. The only time that a Republican has won the popular vote for president since 1988 was in 2004, when Bush was running for re-election after 9/11. If everybody shows up, Democrats win. And I think Kamala Harris probably has a better turnout operation. But over the next 2 months, to answer your question, maybe there's going to be another debate. I think that the chances are higher than people think that there'll be another one.
I hope so.
Especially if Kamala Harris pulls ahead by another couple of points. That can change the thinking really quickly.
For sure.
So we'll see. And that debate,
she would want to bail on it at that point, don't it?
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, she handled him in that first debate.
Oh, for sure. No question.
I don't really like to watch presidential debates because I very rarely think they matter. I mean, I remember Mitt Romney against Barack Obama in the first debate. Mitt Romney ate him up in that first debate. Obama looked tired and unfocused. And as we know, there was a second debate and a third debate, and Obama did very well in the second,
Right.
third debate and won the election. But this debate between Harris and Trump was 67 million people watching. And I think a lot of them undecided, not about how they felt about the candidates, but about how excited they were.
Right.
Whether they believe in their candidate enough to actually go stand in that line. So we'll see, but I think the ground operation is something. One more point, we may not know on election day, the day after election day,
Right.
who won.
Yeah.
It may
We
be
didn't know
several
last time,
days.
right? Yeah.
What's that?
We didn't know last time either, right?
We didn't know the last time.
Yeah.
It could be. I think it was pretty clear that Biden had won, but it wasn't official yet, and
Right.
Donald Trump never really conceded. It could be there are enough. It's American elections are governed by state law, and different states count votes in different ways.
Right.
And absentee ballots in certain states could decide the outcome. So it may be several days. We all remember the 2000 election. This might be crazier than that.
Yeah.
Hopefully not. But I think investing in infrastructure on the ground is going to decide the election over the
Yes.
next 2 months.
Yeah.
Well, you did a great job covering China, Russia, Japan, 9 or 10 countries on elections. This is an industrial conference, and I would say maybe the most important partner to us is Mexico.
Yeah.
And Mexico became the number one trading partner with the United States in 2019 and probably will be for the foreseeable future. Tell us a little bit about the politics and relationship between Mexico and U.S. and maybe Mexico and China, because we're seeing a big onshoring. So we're seeing China bring manufacturing right to the border to take advantage of the no tariffs coming
Yeah.
in from Mexico. So maybe talk to us a little bit about that from the industrial perspective.
And also production of fentanyl is caught up in Mexican politics too. Yes, you're right. I don't think I said a word about Mexico in the entire speech. And in fact, the reason why I didn't is because they, of course, had an election too, but their election is the one that bucks the trend in the sense that Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, the outgoing president, is unusually popular for a guy that's been in power for 5 years. And his designated successor, this woman, Claudia Sheinbaum, the former mayor of Mexico City, won, and it wasn't particularly close. So there was nothing really unpredictable about that election. So starting with just the internal Mexican politics, what's interesting is Claudia Sheinbaum is her own person, without a doubt. She's not just AMLO, Lopez Obrador's lieutenant. She's much more technocratic than Lopez Obrador. Lopez Obrador didn't want to be bothered with a pandemic. He didn't have a foreign policy. Mexico just didn't have a foreign policy. They had a trade policy. So in the beginning, Claudia Sheinbaum had to be sure to capture all of the votes that come from being the designated successor of a popular incumbent. It's only as she becomes president and as we go into next year that we see how she'll differentiate herself. And there is some expectation that she is going to be for lack of a more precise term, pro-business person than Lopez Obrador was. Lopez Obrador is more of a kind of classic ideological leftist. He's certainly not like Hugo Chavez in Venezuela or anything like that. But Sheinbaum is more of a let's figure out what works kind of politician. So there is someone there that the U.S. and Canada can do business with. But it depends to some extent, on her popularity. If there are problems, if any of Mexico's many endemic problems get worse, she may have to fall back on some of Lopez Obrador's support in order to boost her own popularity. If Trump wins in the U.S., then we're probably going to reopen USMCA in some form.
Was the relationship between Trump and Mexico pretty good?
Lopez Obrador was very good with Trump. Lopez Obrador understood it doesn't matter what you think of Donald Trump personally. He's the president of the United States. You have to engage him. I would say the Japanese and the Mexicans manage their relationship with Trump better than any of the other U.S. allies that might have come into conflict. And even they ran into some conflict with Trump. So again, if Trump wins, I think you'll see a lot of pressure on Mexico because there are these Chinese companies that are trying to exploit the U.S. market without paying the tariffs that Trump will probably increase. And also because Mexico has played a role in the fentanyl crisis, that China has been a source of some of the component parts that go into what has been an opioid crisis in America. If Kamala Harris wins, I think you're looking at a more status quo relationship. I think that both Trump and Kamala Harris can have positive relations with Mexico. I think the difference is Trump is going to push because that's how he works.
That's right.
He pushes as hard as he can to get what he can get. And Kamala Harris will be much more sort of traditional accommodationist. We're the great power and we'll find common ground, et cetera, et cetera. But I think generally speaking, the relationship with Mexico will remain strong. Again, Lopez Obrador gave Sheinbaum a roadmap. Here's how you handle President Trump on border issues. You cooperate here, you ignore him there, and we'll get through this. Because, of course, the border crisis is a crisis for Mexico, too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of migrants that are not allowed to come into the U.S. find themselves living in tent cities in parts of Mexico.
Yes.
But I think in general, the relationship will be positive whoever wins. How we get there would be quite different.
Right.
Yeah.
And then quick question, kind of the same thing on China. We're seeing a pull from the U.S. companies and manufacturing to other countries or onshoring back to the United States. So we're seeing a little bit of a pull out of China. How is that in the geopolitical arena? And is it true? Are you seeing that?
Yes.
Yes.
At first, people were talking about decoupling from China. That is a bad idea because you can't just throw up a wall made out of cheap East German concrete and say, we'll be on this side and you'll be on that side. You'll live your life and we'll live ours. That's not the world we live in. It's not the world that we're going to live in. We live in a globalized world. Globalization is going strong. It's not as global as it used to be. Yep. It's regional more than global in a lot of cases, but the global economy continues to be a global economy. So they stopped talking about decoupling, that is strategists trying to figure out how to manage China, and they just started talking about de-risking. De-risking became the new buzzword. We're not decoupling, but what we're doing is we're reducing our exposure to the potential volatility of trouble in the U.S.-China relationship. And Mexico and other nearshoring places have been big beneficiaries of that. The other problem for China is simply, as I said in my speech, they have a middle class now. They can't be factory to the world anymore because people in China don't want those jobs.
Right.
They want white collar jobs.
Yeah.
Huge numbers of very well educated people are leaving educational institutions and they want real work.
Yep.
So that is to the benefit of some of China's neighbors, Vietnam, even Cambodia, the Philippines, places where you can move that production to places where it's not even about geopolitics. It's just the cost is cheaper because the workers work for lower wages.
That's right.
So, and that's part of the box that China finds itself in, is that Xi Jinping has made the mistake, in my humble opinion, of being far too aggressive in his rhetoric on foreign policy, which is, he had to know was going to raise alarm bells all over the world. And the lockdowns of the pandemic, which were beyond draconian in China, weren't even the real problem. They just made the existing problem worse. The existing problem was that the way China had grown to middle income status wasn't going to work anymore. They had to climb the value chain. They had to be producers of high tech. And frankly, they have to feed consumption in that country because they've got a middle class now. So China is in this kind of box, and they have not given any indication that they know how to get out of it. So right now we're seeing both the United States and Europe and Canada, to the best of its ability, and others try and engage China very carefully at this very delicate moment for China, and to try to spot opportunities in China's weakness to improve communication and to improve the relationship. And at the margins, that has been successful, I think, for Americans and for Europeans. How far it can go is another question, because Xi Jinping is still who he is. He's still a Marxist-Leninist. He still believes that state-run companies employ the people that we don't want to see on the streets protesting against our government. But that's the kind of limbo period that we're in right now. And it's not clear that the U.S. election is going to change it all that much.
Super insightful stuff. I wish all of our listeners could have seen the presentation because it was great. So thank you for spending some time with us and sharing your thoughts. Really great insight. Last question. Where are you going to be on election night this year?
I'll probably be in my living room. I know too many people who have been to election headquarters on election night for votes they thought they were going to win that turned into somber. Okay.
Yes.
I mean, it's the same for me with my college football team, my Georgia Bulldogs.
Oh.
I have to have room to move.
That was a stressful one for you last week.
It was beyond. I aged about 4 years.
Yeah. One eat that, one out.
They got out of Kentucky with a 1-point win.
Yeah.
But on election night, I will be in a place where I could sort of move around and use language that I promised not to use on your podcast.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to be up for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we're going to be up for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible, but it's very unlikely that either one is going to win so early.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to hear a lot of too early to call.
Right.
Yeah, because in that last election, we went to bed thinking one thing, we woke up thinking another, right?
Well, I remember in 2000, I stayed up until about 4:30 in the morning when Al Gore famously came back and said, "Wait a minute, I take back my concession speech."
Yes.
Thinking, all right, I got to bed now.
Yeah.
In 2016, I was in Ireland, and so I was completely jet lagged and blah, blah, blah. But I think the more interesting question is not where we're all going to be on election night. It's where we're going to be on the morning after election night.
Yeah.
I mean, I may be sleeping.
Right.
But we'll see, and we may not have an answer the morning after. I hope we do.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Just for
one
clarity.
thing that Democrats and Republicans can all agree on: this can't get over with fast enough.
Correct. Yeah.
Well said.
Let's get some resolution and go.
And just do what you're going to do, and we'll deal with it.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you for joining us. Great
Thank
job.
you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot.
Pleasure. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.